What's up, everybody? Howner64 back here again. How's it been? It's been a great time. Remember last video where we talked about EQ and stuff? So this time, I want to go into and actually talk about Jesus. Right. And this time I actually want to go in and look at a session, actually EQ, use what we talked about and actually use it to instruments to kind of figure out what exactly I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of pull up different instruments. We're going to listen to them. I'm going to show you like some EQ moves I would do, some stuff you can do with your own EQ, but let's just jump into this really quickly. So first thing we want to talk about is going to be drums, of course. I like to start with the kick drum. So as you can see in my session, I actually have a couple different kicks. I have a kick in, a kick out, a kick sub, and an X kick. So the kick in microphone is basically the microphone that is inside the actual kick drum itself. Usually I like to use an SM91 if you have one. If not, you can also use any other kind of kick drum microphone. With the kick in, you're mostly trying to aim for attack if you can get it. So if you actually listen to the kick in, it sounds like this. Simple, so you're getting that beater attack. The outer kick is going to give you more of the beefiness of the kick drum. The kick sub is actually, so it's like an external kind of circular pod that sits on the outside drum head itself, and each time it senses the kick drum being hit, it actually adds a synth pulse wave. You can do the same thing with an oscillator. Basically what you would do is you would have an oscillator going, I believe it'd be it could be any frequency, honestly. It could be like 40 hertz, it could be 60 hertz, and what you would do is you would have a gate, and the gate would trigger to open every time the kick drum would activate, and it would give you the same type of sound as the kick sub. So it'd sound like this. I actually don't even know if that showed up. And then of course the X kick is going to be the sample. For a kick out type of sound, what you're really going to want to do, and if we go ahead and pull up our EQ, is you want to emphasize on having that roundness that I was talking about before. So we're going to go ahead and high pass like we always do. We're going to probably high pass probably about 50, oh not 500, 50, because we are using a very active kick pattern here. There's a couple problem frequencies I like to kick out, so if we go over to here and we hit up 500 and just bring that down, you will start to notice the difference immediately. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exaggerate all this so you can hear the difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it without, and then you'll see me put it in, and you let me know if you hear the difference. So 500, like I said, is a very kind of a boxy frequency. It's where you get a lot of the it's hard to explain, but it literally just sounds like a cardboard box is pretty much what it is. And then in terms of boosting for kick drum, we're gonna go ahead and talk about that 100 range that I was telling you guys about. So 100 is where you're gonna get that punch factor that I was telling you guys about. So let's go ahead and just boost it for dramatic effect again. So we're boosting, by the way, when I'm boosting and cutting, as you can see here, I'm boosting to like 13. I'm doing subtractive EQ by like 13 dB. These are all really drastic moves. And of course, when you're doing like metal, you do want to do extreme moves like this, but I'm just doing them really extreme to kind of prove the point of the range that we're trying to cut out and or add, so you know what you're looking for next time you go into a mix. And by all means, this is no like this is the hard set way, this is the rule you have to do. You can take this advice if you want to. You can always boost wherever you want, cut wherever you want. This is just some frequencies that I found that were very useful for me. With the 100, let's go ahead and play that. So we're going to take it out and in. So the 100 range is a very useful tool because it's a way to get low-end instruments to shine brighter in smaller speakers, because most speakers can only replicate probably around to the bottom of 90 hertz. It depends on the speaker, of course, the manufacturer, but most speakers cut out around 90 hertz, so giving it that 100 boost really helps out with pushing your low end through small speakers on mixes. For the click region that we talked about, you're going to want to go anywhere between like 3 to 5K, sometimes even 8K depending on how you feel. So let's go ahead and just do a 3K boost so we can hear this. So it's going to go ahead and sound like this now with the 3K. And right here at 5K is going to be another one. So let's go ahead and hear that. So there you go, that's kick drums. So the snare bottom is exactly what it sounds like. It is the bottom of the snare. And the reason it sounds so tinny and weird like that is because it is the bottom part of the snare. And if you've never seen the bottom of a snare, it has these metal strips along the bottom. They're called wires. And the wires are actually what give your snares a lot of that spank and a lot of that high-end sizzle. A good trick is if you're like ever in a really bad snare situation, like say like you're recording a drummer whose snare is just absolute trash. Their wires are terrible. They haven't changed them in years. The best thing you actually can do is doing the same trick as that oscillator for the kick drum. Do the same thing, but instead set it to white noise and then do the same gate trick. And if you process that well enough, the white noise can actually blend with your snare track to give you a lot of that high-end kind of sizzle. Then we're going to go over to snare top 2, which I believe is a condenser mic, so it sounds like this. And then we're going to go to snare top 1, which I believe is a condenser microphone. I'm sorry, dynamic microphone. And then, of course, as always, we have our samples. And for snare 2, another sample. So let's go ahead and process snare top, because most times when you're working in a small band setting, you're only miking the top of your snare. You're not going to be miking the bottom, which is why I told you guys about that white noise trick, because it's very useful if you do ever find yourself needing a bottom snare type of sound. You don't always have to do it, by the way. It's just a little quick trick. It's not nearly as good as actually miking the bottom of a snare. So let's go ahead and throw on an equalizer on snare, and we can go ahead and talk about a lot of the frequencies that I like to cut out. So same thing once again, I will normally high pass, and I will high pass anywhere between 100 to 120 depending on the tuning of the snare, what kind of snare it is, what kind of wood it's made out of. This all plays a part to it as well. And I actually didn't talk about this with the kick drum, but with the snare drum, I will go ahead and tell you another trick. So a really good trick for trying to figure out what you like and what you don't like is a technique called sweeping. So what you do is you take any band, I'm just going to take this middle one, the yellow, and you will do kind of a narrow cue. By the way, if you don't know what this is, where it's getting bigger and smaller, that is known as a cue. And with this cue, you're going to actually just move the frequency range down and up. So let's go ahead and just do a sweep real quick, and I'll show you what that sounds like. So it's going to sound like this. The very bottomish sound that you would be getting from a snare drum is going to be anywhere between the 200 to 250 range. We're going to go ahead and boost 200 just so you can hear what it sounds like, and it's going to sound a little like this. And without. Next thing I want to talk about is 500. This is the same thing as kick drum. Basically with a lot of drums, 500 is just a very nasty frequency. It just makes your drums sound like cardboard. I just don't get it. But this is 500 with it in and out. The next big frequency you're probably going to want to look out for is actually going to be that crack that I was talking about, the stick. So basically you could do any type of high shelf boost, usually between 7 and 8K is going to be the sweet spot for you. So we're going to go ahead and just do that boost and you'll hear what it sounds like. Now, of course, if you want, you can always get specific and you can actually target, I think it's normally around the 8K, 9K range is where that stick click is really going to hit you. So it's going to be like this. So there you go. That's pretty much snare drums. So with the overheads, I will show you some general tricks I like to do. So let's go ahead and pull up our EQ here. If we go ahead and high pass, I normally like to high pass my overheads starting at, lordy, 250. 250 I think is good because it cuts out a lot of the low end enough and it still focuses on the high end. You can go literally as high as 350, you can go 400, 550, you can go as high as you want as long as you're not disturbing the cymbals. It honestly doesn't matter. So if we go ahead and have the high pass in, it will sound like this. So as you can see, you're really cutting out all the kick drums, all that nonsense. And then the only real trick I could think of that stands out is adding that air effect I keep talking about. So if we go over here to about 10K, just do a boost, you'll hear it just kind of free up a lot of that sizzle. And for the last trick, I actually learned this by watching I think it was a Nolly interview, and if you actually do kind of a broad stroke at around 5 to 6K, kind of like this and a little bit deep, it actually gets rid of a lot of that abrasiveness you get when the drummer hits his crash cymbal, and it sounds a lot like this. I know what you guys are thinking. You're like, well, that sounds really dull, but if you couple it in with that high-end trick I was telling you about before, now you're going to start getting a little bit of that cymbal sound that you're usually used to. Of course, coupled with compression, that changes the whole game. But this is how I kind of like to allow overheads to be present in a mix, because sometimes you want to bring your overheads down a lot just because that repetitive can really mess with your psyche. It really starts to hit your ears a lot. But with this kind of trick, it still allows your cymbals to be forward and present in a mix, but it also kind of gets it out of the way and keeps it from being too hard on your ears. So it's going to sound like this. And then with it off, we are going to go over to bass guitar. Now the thing about bass is I actually have two different bass guitars here. I have a bass amp, which is basically the bass DI going through an amp, and I also have the bass DI. These two things are very different, and depending on what kind of mix you're going for, it could change a lot. I know a lot of people don't have the ability to amp up a bass guitar, so most times they're stuck with a DI. So I'm gonna kind of go over both to show you what you really need. The thing about bass is you really rely on a lot of dynamic control rather than EQ control for a bass guitar, because most times when you are playing the bass A lot of the times it's usually after something with the guitars is already made, whether it be a guitar scratch track or the guitarist actually went through and did his rhythms, just so that way the bass can be tighter. If not, if you are recording your bass, like say you're fresh off of drums and there is no guitar scratch track to be known for, then you would normally have your bass come through. But at that point, I feel like you would really just have a DI so that way you could reamp it at any time. So my bass tone actually sounds like this through the amp. Which is very aggressive, very in your face, and I love that kind of bass tone. So if we actually go over here, the first thing I actually like to do, and believe it or not, is high pass once again. I normally high pass anywhere between 80 to 90 hertz. Now, why do I do this? It's because if you have the bass and the kick drum going at the same time, but you don't make room for one or the other, it ends up having a really muddy low end mix. I usually let the low end of my kick drum come through, and I try to pass my the sub of my bass to be a little bit over the kick drum, because most times the drummer and the bassist are pretty locked on tight together. I know a lot of times now with metal, it's usually the guitarist and the drummer are locked on tight together, and the bass is usually just mirroring the guitars. So by doing this kind of low end sweep, I am actually allowing my kick drum to come in, and it is actually reinforcing a lot of what my bass is doing. So if we go ahead and play these together, it sounds like this. So with the bass, you can do a lot of cutting as well. Like I said, the really subby region of bass that's kind of unpleasing is around the 125, 130 mark. So if we go ahead and just boost that, it's going to sound like this. And it's the kind of muddiness that doesn't really add to the bass. It's more of something that kind of takes away note definition and makes the bass actually sound really sloppy. So sometimes you can cut that out, not too much, because it is the sub of the bass, but it does add more definition to your bass if you do take it out a little bit. So it sounds a lot like this. So you see how it takes away a lot, but if you do just the right amount, like maybe about 2 or 3 dB, it's very small on the graph, but you can actually tell the difference. See what I mean? It just cleans it up just a little bit, doing that 2 to 3 dB. It's something that's really subtle, but it does clean up a lot. Another thing is actually that 500 to 600 range that you've been cutting out of drums. You can actually add some of that back in over on bass guitar, depending on how it's tuned. So if we actually do a little bit of a boost around the 550 mark, it's going to sound like this. So that's 300. So that 500 kind of range, that's where I was talking about, where you get that like throaty kind of sound, which makes your bass sound actually a little bit thicker in the mix. And the last thing is actually between the around 1 to 2K mark, you're actually going to be getting a lot of the string noise of bass. A lot of the, depending on if your bassist plays fingers or picks, it's going to be a lot of that noise. So let's go ahead and hear that. So that's just another one of those things you want to be careful of. The next thing we're going to move on to is the hard stuff, guitars. Now, if we are focusing purely on EQ for guitars, I personally like to high pass. The lowest I will go is 120. I will go 120, sometimes I will go up to 150. This is just because when you are playing guitar, you still need to make room for the bass player. The bass player has to be present. So if I go ahead and I have my guitars like this, and I have the bass going and my guitar going with the 120 kind of out of the way, it's going to sound like this. You see what I mean? That 120, just taking out the 120, just it frees up a lot of space for the bass definition. Remember when I was telling you guys about that high-end fizz that's just not needed? That's where your low pass is going to come in. So with the low pass on this guy, I will go as low as about 9K, depending on the fizzle factor. I have 3 different bands I like to go through. I will do 9K as the absolute minimum. Sometimes you can go lower if you really need it. I will then go up to 12K, and then I will go to 16. So for this one, we're going to start with the 16K, so we can, well, we're going to start with the off, then do 16, so you can hear the difference. This is off. And then with it on. So you can hear it doesn't do much of a difference there. If we go ahead and do 12, now you're going to hear a difference. And now I'll take it off. So as you heard there, 12K, that's a good one. And now let's go ahead and do the 9K so you can hear what that sounds like. So this is going to be with the 9K off. And then we're going to low pass at 9K. So as you can hear, I would probably stick with the 12K on this one just because you don't want to lose too much of that high-end note definition because you do need that in your mix. So the 12K is probably going to be best. You might actually get away with a 10K here. I think 12K is the best because you're still getting that high end, but you're still getting rid of a lot of that hiss. And if a lot of you guys don't really know what I'm talking about, like with the hiss, I'll go ahead and actually high pass up to 8K here so you can hear what I'm talking about. So this is only 8K and above. Like it's just Metal Zone fuzz. It's just fuzz. There's literally nothing else added to there. It's just fuzz. And the next thing I was talking about was that 750 range. This is just something me personally, I just don't care for much in guitars. So I'm actually gonna boost it so you hear what I'm talking about, and then I'm gonna cut it so you hear what I'm talking about. So this is with it boosted. And then let's go ahead and cut it out. And then I'm going to put it in and then take it out so you'll hear the difference. So that's another trick that I like to do there. The 200, 300 range is going to be the fullness on your guitar. That's more of the bottom end. But be careful with this because it's a muddy bottom end. Kind of like the 125 on bass. You could boost it if you need it, but you can also take it away if it's getting in your way. So it's going to be a bit like, sound like this. So you see what I mean? Like if it's gone, it sounds like a wet blanket with distortion on it. And if it's there, then it depends on the sound you're going for, really. The only other thing I could think of would probably be that 4K thing that we went over. If we actually go over to 4K and we do a really acute, you will hear what I'm talking about. So this is that 4K boost that I was telling you about earlier. It's just a frequency that's always kind of there and it's really sharp and I hate it. But if you take it out just a little bit, it's very pleasing for the guitar. So we're going to play with it in and then play with it out. So it's just like I said, it's kind of like when I had someone explain it to me, they said that the 4K range on guitars is kind of like fangs on a tiger. It's like it's very necessary, but getting rid of too much of it really holds back the tone. So really, if I were building like a really kind of metally kind of tone here, I think I would probably have my EQ look something like this. So let's go ahead and hear with it on, and then with it off. So as you can hear there, it's like, it's kind of just getting rid of all the stuff that's really in the way, and it's allowing for a lot more note definition, a lot more clarity. That being said, I do want to talk about a little bit of stuff at the end of this video now. So if you did enjoy it, go ahead and click off now, and if you care about what's happening in the channel, then stay around. As you guys know, if you've been here for a while, this is the studio room. You know, we have the nice workout equipment back there, but I'm actually about to move. So I think this video will be the last video recorded in this room. I just want to apologize if any videos do start coming out late, or if they seem a bit rushed or in poorer quality than normal. It's because I'm still trying to get videos out for you guys while also simultaneously trying to move into this new space, because it is going to be a lot better. Hopefully I won't be out for too long. If anything does happen, I think they're still setting up internet over there, but I just want to let you guys know, have the heads up that changes are coming. I've been Houndour64. Thank you all for joining me on this journey, and if you did stick around for this very long video, I'm looking at my recording, it's very long. Thank you once again. If you guys do have any ideas or questions or comments, always comment them down below, like I always try to tell you, and I will be back with some fire real soon. See you guys later.